Times Radio Breakfast with Asma Mir and Stig Abel.
Charlie's on his way at 10 o'clock, but after 5 years undercovering Pablo Escobar's gang and successfully helping to bring down one of the biggest and most intricate money laundering operations of all time, you'd have thought that Robert Mazur would fancy a quiet life. Instead, he took on a new identity, a money launderer named Robert Baldassare, infiltrating Central America's criminal elite. When his cover was blown, rather than escaping to safety, he decided to see the mission through, exposing the Cali cartel and whoever betrayed him. We've been speaking to Robert Mazur about what it takes to go that deep undercover.
You really need to be as natural as possible because these people have a sixth sense. They'll pick up on if you exhibit any kind of nervousness, whether it's through the words you use or your mannerisms. It's a tremendous liability. So you really have to be trained and train yourself to recognize you can be your own worst enemy unless you have those issues as under control as they can be.
And presumably at all time you're fearing that your cover might be blown. That actually happened to you. How did it happen?
Corruption. One of the co-workers of mine who was involved in the undercover operation, unbeknownst to me and my other colleagues, had long before he became a part of this operation, detailed in the Betrayal, was already involved with people affiliated with the Cali cartel in drug trafficking and also compromising cases by unlawfully disclosing law enforcement operations to criminals.
So he basically says you're an undercover agent. What happened next?
Well, because of the people that he and I were dealing with, we were dealing with money brokers who had up until that point, I've been working with them for 4 to 5 months. Now, these were 2 out of about 35 or so bad guys I was dealing with. So in an isolated portion of the bad guy world, he just out and out said he's a DEA undercover agent, and anybody and everybody who's affiliated with him is either an agent or an informant. Those people really had to weigh whether or not they would go to the people at the top and let them know that they were responsible for allowing a DEA agent to get information about them. So that's not something that you necessarily rush right out and go tell your fellow bad guys about. So although I was outed and although I came very close to being kidnapped, it was a small portion of the people that I dealt with because he only had exposure to those 2 individuals.
So you decided to hang in there because actually you could carry on exposing him and other people because you weighed the risk and thought you could do that.
Well, the only way we were going to be able to put him behind bars was going to be if I stayed undercover and fed him misinformation, because he was the Officer of the Year for a medium-sized city in the United States, rising star who in many people's eyes walked on water. So we were going to have him absolutely dead to rights. We had information that he had done this that we got from an informant that was at a very, very high level in the Cali cartel. She was at a meeting with some of the leaders of the Cali cartel when the topic came up, and they shared with her that they knew that I was a DEA agent. So we knew we had him, but that informant was a non-testifying informant. Sometimes because of the level of access that an informant has, and based upon an agreement that law enforcement might make with them in advance, they're going to be providing intelligence. They're not going to be on a witness stand, raising their right hand and testifying to what it is that occurred. So we had him, but we didn't have him. So we needed to really, I stayed under for another 3 months after we knew that he had exposed me in order to be able to get the solid evidence.
And what would have happened if they had kidnapped you, Robert?
I would have been tortured and killed.
And knowing that, how did you stay there for 3 months?
A couple of reasons, I think. One, I was hell-bent to make sure that I participated in getting the evidence that we needed in order to prosecute him. This was something that was going to ultimately lead to a long-range problem for law enforcement. If this person was not prosecuted, if we didn't get the evidence that we needed in order to put him behind bars, he was eventually going to start causing other people their lives. And so I was pretty compelled to do that. But I also try to explain to people what my motivations were when I was doing this second long-term undercover operation. You have to understand, I had been undercover as a money launderer working for Pablo Escobar and the leaders of the Medellín Cartel. And when that case was over, we had witnesses and other evidence about the fact that they had issued a contract on my life. So I had gone underground at that stage for several years and testified in trials and did all those things. But when that was over, and as a result of that experience, what I witnessed when I was in the underworld was that there was a segment of the international banking business law community that were major assets to criminal organizations all over the world. And I'm not suggesting that every bank is involved in that, but there certainly are a set number of people. Once you're in the underworld, as I was accepted, when you go to the right people, and basically these are lawyers, unscrupulous lawyers, that pretty much introduce you to the people who will handle this hot money and help you to get it laundered. What I saw was that was not an anomaly. That was standard operating business by a small segment of the banking and business community and the legal community that wanted to make profits off of that type of money. There's like $2 trillion a year seeking secrecy from governments every single year, not just from drug trafficking, tax evaders, all kinds of crimes. So I wanted to go back in that world and help the public to know and get the evidence for my agency to substantiate and to help them to realize that this is not something that's rare. This is something that's routinely done. So in a sense, information became my heroine. I really, really wanted to be able to get the information that would help everybody to recognize what I'd seen firsthand. And I think that clouded my judgment when it came to the issue of staying under after I knew I was compromised.
And now you've turned over 2 cartels, Robert. Is your life forever going to be one eye looking over your shoulder?
You know, I think that so many of the people that I dealt with in the past are dead. They were either murdered or they were passed away for, quote, natural causes. So, you know, I'm not so sure that there's anybody from that world that's going to jump out of a hedge and and try to hurt me today. But, you know, anytime you've done this type of work for a living and you know that there were people who wanted to kill you, you take certain natural precautions. And I think it's a normal evolution from a very abnormal life that you just have to live with.
That's Robert Mazur there. And you had to wonder how he could be undercover for 2 different drug lords. You could hear it in his voice when I said, what happens if they when they found you? They would have tortured and killed me. Like, okay, if you could talk about it in that calm voice, you're probably the right man for the job.
Absolutely. Robert Mazur was his name.